The envelope rested on the desk among other correspondence, a plain white one bearing the blue emblem of Riverside National Bank. I hadn't paid it much heed at first, occupied with organizing my bills. Only after finishing my second mug of coffee did I pick up the unopened letter and turn it over in my hands. It struck me as odd. I had never conducted business with Riverside National. Opening the mail, I scanned the initial lines and felt a chill run down my spine. Dear Mr. Thompson. It reminded me of an overdue monthly mortgage payment. What followed was an amount that made my head spin. $9,575. What in the world is this? I muttered as I kept reading. The letter stated that I was delinquent for the second month on a $1,200,000 mortgage loan taken out in April. If I didn't settle the arrears within 2 weeks, the bank would be compelled to initiate foreclosure proceedings. My first thought was to contact the bank and clarify that there had been a mistake. I had never borrowed such an enormous sum. My modest home on Maple Street, purchased with George 35 years ago, had long been paid off. Why would I, a 70-year-old widower, take out a new loan? I dialed the Riverside National number listed in the letter. After a lengthy hold, I finally heard the operator's voice. Hello, this is Walter Thompson. I received a letter about a late payment on a loan, but there's some error. I didn't borrow any money from your bank. One moment. Mr. Thompson, I'll verify the information, the woman replied courteously, while she examined the records. I gazed out the kitchen window at my small but well-tended garden. George had passed away 12 years ago, and since then, I had lived alone in the house, gradually adjusting to the life of a widower. 45 years together. And then emptiness. No, not entirely empty. I have children, Emily and Michael, but they had long since moved on with their own lives, seldom thinking of their father. Mr. Thompson? The operator's voice pulled me back to reality. According to our files, on April 20th this year, you did indeed secure a mortgage for $1,200,000 over a 30-year term. The loan was used to purchase property at Lakeside Drive, number 45 in Springfield. But that's impossible, I exclaimed. I've never signed any documents for a loan, especially not for that amount, huh? We have all the required paperwork, Mr. Thompson, including your signature on the loan agreement, a copy of your driver's license, social security number, and tax returns for the past 3 years. My mouth went dry. Someone had used my information to apply for a massive loan. This is fraud, I stated firmly. Someone has stolen my data. In that case, you should report it to the police. Mr. Thompson. And you ought to visit our main branch with identification for a hearing. But I must warn you that until the matter is resolved, the bank will hold you responsible for the loan repayments. After the call, I sat at the table, feeling my hands tremble. Who could have done such a thing? Who had access to my documents? Suddenly, the phone rang. My daughter's name appeared on the screen. Dad, did you remember today is Sophia's birthday? Emily began without greeting. We're expecting you at 3 o'clock. And please don't wear that awful green sweater. This is a restaurant, not your vegetable patch. Sophia, my granddaughter, was turning 14. Of course. I remembered and had prepared a gift, a silver necklace with a heart pendant. I remember. Emily, I said, but I have a serious problem. I received a letter from the bank. Dad, don't start that again, she interrupted with poorly concealed irritation. If it's another credit card advertisement, just throw it away. How many times do I have to tell you that you don't need to open all this mail? Emily, it's not an ad. Someone has taken out nearly $1.5 million worth of credit in my name. There was a pause on the line. What nonsense is this, Dad? Emily finally said with a nervous chuckle. Who would lend that much to a retiree? You're mixing things up. I'm not mixing anything up, I protested, I have a letter from the bank. It states in black and white about a loan for $1,200,000 issued in my name with my supposed signature on it. Dad, your blood pressure must be spiking again. Emily's voice turned saccharine, laced with that concern that always meant utmost annoyance. Are you sure you took your medication today? Don't talk to me like I'm a senile old man. I rarely raised my voice, but I couldn't hold back now. I'm lucid, and I know exactly what's happening. Someone stole my information and took out a loan, and I'm going to report it to the police. The police? Oh my God, Dad, are you trying to embarrass us in front of the whole town? Emily sounded panicked. Look, I'll come over after work. I'll look at this letter and we'll figure it out. But for heaven's sake, don't make any calls. All right, I agreed, feeling slightly unsettled by her reaction. Come after work. Hanging up. I pondered. My daughter's response seemed strange to me. She was overly anxious about the threat of going to the police. Emily was usually the first to advise me not to make a fuss over nothing. To distract myself from my anxious thoughts, I decided to get ready for my granddaughter's party. I took out a dark blue suit from the closet, which I only wore on special occasions, and began ironing it. My mind kept returning to the mysterious loan. At 3 o'clock, I was at the Elegant Orchid restaurant, an upscale establishment with exorbitant prices and tiny portions. Michael, my son, was already there with his wife, Patricia, and their teenage children, 16-year-old Ethan and 15-year-old Olivia. Michael worked as a customs broker and always emphasized his status with expensive watches and suits. Dad, you didn't comb your hair properly again, he said instead of greeting me as I approached the table. It's sticking up over your left ear. Hello, Michael. I ignored his remark. Hello, Patricia. Hello, kids. The teenagers mumbled something in response, still glued to their phones. Patricia nodded with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Where's Emily? I asked, sitting down in the offered chair. Running late at work? Michael replied, Some issue with the Johnson family. You know how responsible she is with her duties as an inspector? Emily worked in social services, handling dysfunctional families. She always said her job was to rescue children from incompetent parents. Sometimes I thought that phrase was also a reproach toward me. We had been sitting at the table for half an hour when Emily finally arrived with her husband, David, and the birthday girl, Sophia, my granddaughter. A tall girl with brown hair for her age was wearing an expensive dress that made her look like a miniature version of her mother. Grandpa, you're here, Sophia exclaimed with feigned surprise, as if my presence at her birthday party was something unusual. Of course I am. Dear, I wouldn't have missed your birthday for anything. I handed her a neatly wrapped box with the necklace. Happy birthday. Sophia took the gift without much enthusiasm and set it aside without even opening it. Thanks, she murmured, then turned to her cousin Olivia to show her something on her phone. Dad, what was that story you mentioned about the loan? Emily whispered to me, leaning close to my ear while the others were busy with the menu. I didn't make anything up. I replied just as quietly. I have a letter from the bank. For goodness sake, don't talk about it in front of everyone. Emily straightened up and said loudly, Dad, do you want salad or soup? Lunch passed in a tense atmosphere. Michael and Emily discussed some mutual work matters, occasionally turning to me with condescending questions like, Do you still remember Uncle Richard or Dad? Are you sure you're okay living alone in that big house? My house isn't that big, just 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. But the kids periodically suggested I move to a smaller place. I suspected they just wanted to sell the house and split the money. After lunch, when Sophia opened the gifts, I noticed Emily and Michael exchanging meaningful glances as my granddaughter carelessly set aside the silver necklace. It must be vintage, Emily muttered, so I could hear. I wanted to say it was a replica of my grandmother's necklace that she wore her whole life, but I stayed silent. What was the point of explaining the value of things to people for whom only price mattered? When the party was over, Emily said she would stop by my house in an hour. I took the bus home, feeling strangely anxious. There was something about my daughter's behavior that made me uneasy. Back home, I read the letter from the bank again. The address of the property bought with the loan money seemed familiar. Lakeside Drive was a new, upscale lakeside neighborhood often featured in the local paper. Had someone stolen my information to buy a house there while waiting for Emily? I turned on the computer. A gift from Michael last Christmas. To keep you up to date, Dad. I'm not great with computers, but I have basic skills. I opened a search engine and typed in the address, Lakeside Drive 45, Springfield. Images of a luxurious two-story house with panoramic windows and a view of the lake appeared on the screen. The value of such a property could indeed be around $1.5 million. I scrolled down the page and froze when I saw information about a recent sale. The house had been sold in April this year, and the transaction date matched the date the loan was processed. I heard a car pull up and looked out the window. Emily had parked her new SUV in front of the house. I noticed the car was new too. Previously, she owned a mid-sized sedan. When my daughter entered the house, I immediately noticed her nervousness. She avoided my eyes and fixed her hair too often, a gesture that always revealed her agitation. "Where's that letter, Dad?" she asked without taking off her coat. I silently handed her the envelope. Emily scanned the message quickly, and I saw her pale. "This is some kind of mistake," she said uncertainly. "Or a scam. Someone used your data. That's exactly what I told you on the phone this morning," I said. "And I'm going to report it to the police." No, Emily said hastily. "I'll handle it myself. I have a friend at Riverside National who can help sort this out." "I also discovered something," I said calmly. "The address in the letter is a new house on Lakeside Drive. It's a very nice home, according to the pictures on the internet. 2 stories overlooking the lake." Emily looked up abruptly. "You've searched online?" "Yes." I nodded. "And I also noticed you have a new car. I don't remember you mentioning plans to change it." "Dad, what are you implying?" Emily's voice hardened. "Nothing yet," I shrugged. "Just an observation." Emily clutched her purse anxiously. "Look, I said I'd deal with that stupid letter. You have nothing to worry about." "I think I do," I countered. "Someone took out a loan in my name, used my documents, forged my signature. And if I don't pay that loan, I'll lose my house." "No one is taking your house away from you," Emily cried out with sudden fury. "Damn it, Dad! Why do you always have to make everything so complicated? I told you I'd fix the problem." She was almost shouting, and I could see red spots on her neck, a sure sign of extreme agitation. There was only one thing that could provoke such a reaction. Emily knew more about the loan than she was letting on. "It was you," I said quietly, looking her straight in the eyes. "You took out the loan in my name." My daughter looked away. "Don't be ridiculous, Dad. Why would I do that?" "I don't know," I replied, "but I'll find out." Emily snatched the letter from my hands. "I'll take this. And please don't do anything stupid. Don't call the bank. Don't go to the police. I'll take care of it." She rushed out of this house, slamming the door hard. I was left standing in the middle of the living room, feeling profound distress. My own daughter had stolen my information to buy a $1 million dream house, one she hadn't even told me about. In my inbox, I noticed an unread message from the bank. When I opened it, I saw an electronic copy of the loan contract that had been sent to my address when the deal was finalized. In the borrower's signature column was a forgery of my signature. It was so crude that it was strange the bank hadn't noticed it. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a cold anger rising inside. For years, my children had treated me like a burden, tolerating my presence at family events with barely concealed annoyance, talking to me as if I were already gone. And now, Emily had crossed the final line. She hadn't just stolen my data, She had endangered the only thing I had left: my home, my independence, my dignity. I pulled the address book from my desk drawer and began flipping through it, searching for the right number. I needed a lawyer, but not the kind Michael would recommend. I needed someone who would stand by me against my own children. Sarah Klein's law office was in an old brick building in the business district of Springfield. I found her listing in the city directory, where she modestly advertised herself as an expert in elder law protection and financial abuse. Exactly what I needed. I had called ahead in the morning. And the secretary? To my surprise, scheduled an appointment for the same day at 2:30. Apparently, the lawyer's schedule wasn't too packed. Getting off the bus, I stood in front of the entrance for a moment, composing myself. Dealing with lawyers had always seemed intimidating to me. I had only had to see a lawyer twice in my life, when George and I bought a house and when we made our wills. In both cases, it was George's acquaintance, and he handled all the negotiations himself. I can manage, I told myself, and pushed open the heavy door. The reception area was small, but cozy. Behind the desk sat a young woman with short hair and thick, round glasses. "Mr. Thompson," she asked when she saw me. "Ms. Klein is expecting you. Please come in." The lawyer's office was unexpected. Instead of a stiff, formal interior, I saw a bright room with large windows and potted plants. Behind a wide desk sat a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and a bright blue suit. "Hello? Mr. Thompson?" She stood up and extended her hand to me. "Sarah Klein, have a seat." Her handshake was firm, like someone accustomed to projecting confidence. I sat in the chair she offered me. "Tell me what brings you here," Sarah said, pulling out a notebook. I took a deep breath and started with the letter from the bank. I told her about the call to the bank, Emily's reaction, how I found pictures of the house online, and finally my conversation with my daughter. My voice trembled, but I tried to keep it from getting too emotional. Sarah listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen thoughtfully on the desk. "What you've described, Mr. Thompson, is a classic case of identity theft, aggravated by the fact that the perpetrator is a family member. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon, especially among the elderly." "Do you think my daughter really did it?" I asked, still hoping for some other explanation. "What do you think?" Sarah looked at me carefully. I sighed. "I think I do. The new car, the nervousness when talking about the loan, the attempts to silence me. But I find it hard to believe Emily could do that. She's always been ambitious and a bit arrogant. But to commit a crime, people change," Sarah said, "and not always for the better. Tell me, has your daughter shown signs, shall we say, of disrespect toward your personal and financial independence?" I reflected. There have been instances over the years where my children tried to control my decisions, especially those involving money. After George, my husband, died, Michael insisted I give him power of attorney to manage my accounts. I said he claimed it would be safer, but I refused. It caused quite a scandal. He even threatened to declare me incompetent if I continued being stubborn. "And the property. Have they always talked about selling the house?" I nodded. "Especially in the last 2 years. Emily says it's too big for me alone, that I can't manage. And Michael is calculating how much I could get for selling it. They even found me a nice little apartment in a retirement home." Sarah made notes in her notebook. "Do you have a will who inherits your property?" "Emily and Michael equally. I said that's what George and I decided many years ago. Though I admit I've been thinking about changing it lately, leaving the money to the grandchildren instead of the kids." "I see," Sarah nodded. "Now, let's get back to our case. We have a few options. First is going to the police and reporting the fraud. That's the most drastic action, and it could lead to criminal prosecution of your daughter." I flinched at the words, Emily, a criminal. My daughter in jail. It seemed absurd. Are there other options? I asked quietly. The second option is a civil lawsuit, Sarah continued. We can sue your daughter and have the loan agreement invalidated as fraudulent. It's less severe than a criminal case, but it will still lead to a public scandal. And the third option, I clutched my wallet anxiously, try to resolve the issue amicably. Sarah shrugged. I can write a letter on your behalf, presenting the facts and demanding your daughter take over the loan or repay it immediately. The threat of criminal prosecution might force her to act. I was silent, trying to digest the information. All the options seemed terrible. But even more terrible was the thought that my own daughter had put me in this position. What if I just do nothing? I asked finally. If I just ignore this loan, then the bank will start foreclosure proceedings. Sarah shook her head. First, they'll charge late fees, then turn it over to collectors. Eventually, they could sue you and enforce foreclosure, including seizing your assets, which is your house. But that's not fair, I cried. I didn't sign anything. Justice and the law aren't always the same. Mr. Thompson, Sarah said gently, to prove you didn't take the loan, we have to prove fraud. And that means naming the fraudster. I closed my eyes, feeling a lump in my throat. As long as I can remember, Emily has always been a difficult child. Stubborn, sharp, ambitious, without childish sentimentality. She rarely made friends at school, but she always got the highest grades. She often clashed with her brother, but she could manipulate him. George thought she would become a great lawyer or politician. Our girl has character, he said with pride. But there was something else about Emily. Beneath the mask of confidence hid a painful need for recognition, for validation of her worth. I noticed it in the smallest things, how she bragged about new things, how desperately she tried to impress others, how painfully she reacted to any criticism. I remember when she was 15, she came home crying because she didn't get the lead role in the school play. That part was mine. Mine, she screamed, locking herself in a room. And the next day, we learned that the girl who got the part had an accident. Someone pushed her down the stairs, and she broke her arm. Emily got the part. George and I never discussed the incident, but I could see the worry in his eyes. As an adult, Emily didn't change. She married David not for love, but because he came from a well-connected, respectable family. She chose to work in social services not out of compassion for troubled families, but because it gave her power over others. And I knew she was always envious of people living in luxurious neighborhoods, driving expensive cars, vacationing in exotic countries. Mr. Thompson, Sarah's voice brought me back to reality. Do you need some time to think? Yes, I think so. I nodded. It's too big a decision to make right away. I understand. Sarah handed me a business card. Call me when you've decided how to proceed. But don't take too long. Time is against us. I stood up to leave, but paused at the door. Ms. Klein, what would you do if you were me? Sarah hesitated. I can't give such advice. Mr. Thompson, each person must decide for themselves what's more important, family ties or justice. And if there's no choice, I asked softly, if the family ties are already broken, then only justice remains. Sarah replied simply, and self-respect? I left the office with a heavy heart. It was drizzling outside, and I opened the umbrella I always carried with me, an old habit that my children often teased me about. Grandpa, the weather forecaster. Sophia called me. Dad, there are weather apps now. Emily? Walking slowly to the bus stop, I thought about Sarah's words. Family ties or justice. But isn't real family based on mutual respect? Can there be a true family where some members cheat and exploit others? The bus was late, and I sat on a bench. People hurried past, sheltering from the rain, indifferent to others' problems, and my mind swirled with memories. There's Emily, a little girl with pigtails, running to me with a drawing, Dad, look, it's you. In the drawing was an angular figure of a man with a beaming smile. There's her as a teenager, rolling her eyes when I tried to hug her in front of school. Dad, you're embarrassing me. There's her at college graduation, proudly showing her diploma. And I saw in her eyes, look, I achieved everything on my own. Though it wasn't true, George and I worked overtime to pay for her education. And then everything changed. After Sophia was born, Emily became even more distant. Her visits became infrequent, a formality. Her conversations turned into a list of my shortcomings. Dad, you should watch your appearance. Dad, your house looks outdated. Dad, you talk about the past too much. When George died, Emily organized the funeral without consulting me on anything. Chose the casket, flowers, even the suit for me. You're not in a position to make decisions right now. Dad, she said in a tone that brooked no argument. And after the funeral, she and Michael started dividing George's things as if I didn't exist. His stamp collection, which he had gathered all his life. Michael took it for himself without asking me. It'll just gather dust at your place. Dad. I had become a burden to them, a problem to be solved, an old man who could only cause trouble. They no longer saw me as a person. They probably never did. The bus arrived, and I climbed the steps. Careful with my wet umbrella. A young woman offered me a seat, and I nodded gratefully. A small, polite gesture from a stranger, more than I'd received from my own children in recent years. At home, the first thing I did was pull out the phone and dial the only person I could trust. Margaret Hayes, a friend from my days at the post office. Margaret is 5 years older than me, but she has more energy than people half her age. When she was widowed around the same time as me, she didn't sink into depression, but volunteered at an animal shelter and even started learning Spanish for general development. Walter, she answered after the third ring. Is something wrong? You don't usually call in the middle of the day. I briefly told her about the loan situation and the visit to the lawyer. What a snake! Margaret exclaimed when I finished. After all you and George did for her, Walter, you should sue her. No, the police. Let her answer to the full extent of the law. I don't know. Margaret, I sighed. She's my daughter. How can I put her in jail? How could she steal from her own father? Margaret countered. Walter, listen to me. I know you love your children. All parents love their kids, even the most ungrateful ones. But sometimes love means letting them face the consequences of their actions. If Emily gets away with this fraud, what will she do next time? Her words made sense, but I still had a hard time accepting the thought of filing a lawsuit against my daughter. I'll think about it. I said, I need some time, but not too much, Margaret warned. The bankers won't wait forever. And remember, I'm always on your side, no matter what you decide. After talking to Margaret, I felt a bit better. At least there was one person in the world who supported me unconditionally. I brewed tea and sat by the window, watching the rain intensify into a downpour. The drops tapped on the glass, creating a soothing rhythm. My thoughts gradually became clearer. What would George say if he were in this situation? My husband was a kind man, but with firm principles. Justice must be served, he often said. And besides, you can't let others wipe their feet on you, even if those others are your family. Perhaps I had let the children disrespect me for too long. Perhaps it was my gentleness and adaptable nature that led Emily to take this step. She knew I'd rather stay silent than make a scene, but not this time. Don't be a doormat for people to wipe their feet on. No longer the invisible one whose opinions can be ignored. No longer the old father tolerated out of politeness. I picked up the phone and dialed Sarah Klein's number. Mr. Thompson, she answered in surprise. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. I've decided, I said firmly. I want to file a lawsuit against my daughter and a police report for fraud. Are you sure? I could hear doubt in Sarah's voice. It's a big step. Absolutely sure, I replied. If I back down now, I'll never respect myself again. And my children will never respect me. All right, Sarah said after a pause. Come back tomorrow morning at 10. We'll prepare the necessary papers. When I hung up, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in years, I had made a decision for myself. Not thinking about what the kids would say, it was both scary and liberating at the same time. The phone rang again. Michael's name appeared on the screen. Dad, have you lost your mind? He started without greeting. Emily just called me in hysterics. She says you're threatening to sue her over some letter from the bank. It's not nothing. Michael, I said calmly. Your sister took out a loan in my name without my knowledge. That's called fraud. Come on, Dad, my son snorted. It's no big deal, so she borrowed money. She'll pay it back. What difference does it make to you? The difference is it's illegal, I said. And if she stops paying, I'm the one in trouble. She won't stop paying. Michael raised his voice. Damn it. Dad, why are you always such a hassle? Always making everything too complicated. Did you know, I asked directly, did you know Emily used my papers? Michael hesitated for a second. I didn't get into the details. She said you had an agreement. We had no agreement. I cut him off. She stole my data. And if you knew about it and didn't stop her, then you're an accessory. An accessory? Michael laughed, but it sounded nervous. Dad, you've watched too many crime shows. No one thinks it's a crime. It's just a family arrangement. No, Michael, it's a crime, I said resolutely. And I intend to seek justice. For God's sake, Dad. There was impatience in my son's voice. What justice you want to put your daughter in jail? Destroy the whole family. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that my children think I'm so insignificant that they don't even see a problem in using my name for their schemes, I replied. I'm thinking about the fact that both of you have treated me like a burden for years. I'm thinking it's time to stop. Dad, listen. Michael's voice became sweetly persuasive. Let me come over to your place and we can talk about this. It's just a misunderstanding. Emily didn't mean any harm. She just wanted a better life for her family at my expense. Don't be so dramatic, Michael. No one is leaving you with debts. Emily is paying and she'll continue to pay. What if she loses her job, gets sick, decides she doesn't want to pay anymore? Then what? That won't happen, Michael said confidently. Dad, you have to trust your children. No. Michael, I replied softly. It's you who should respect your father, but you don't. And now it's time to pay the price. I hung up without waiting for a response. My hands were shaking, but I felt surprisingly calm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a helpless old man, but like someone who could stand up for himself. Of course, Michael and Emily would pressure me, using every means to make me back down. They would threaten, cajole, manipulate. They might even try to portray me as a senile old man out of his mind. But now I had Sarah Klein, a lawyer who believed me and was ready to fight for my rights. I had Margaret, a friend who supported me unconditionally. And I had my resolve not to let anyone else, even my own children, trample on my dignity. The rain outside the window grew heavier, but I felt like my life was finally starting to clear up. I picked up the phone and called Sarah again. Ms. Klein, I was wondering if we win the case. What happens to the house Emily bought with the loan money? The bank will likely seize it to repay the debt, Sarah replied. And if your daughter is found guilty of fraud, she could face fines and possibly probation? I understand. I said, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up and thought Emily would lose her dream house, might have a criminal record, perhaps hate me for the rest of her life. Michael would probably side with his sister. I might lose not only my children but also my grandchildren. The price of justice is high, but the price of silence is even higher. The loss of self-respect. The feeling that I betrayed myself by letting my children deceive me with impunity. No, I can't back down. This is my last chance to show my children that I'm not a waste of space, not a crazy old man, but a human being with rights and dignity. And if I have to clash with my family to do it, so be it. I stared at the rain outside the window and thought that tomorrow a new chapter of my life would begin. A chapter where I would be the protagonist, not a side character in my children's lives. The next morning was cloudy, but the rain had stopped. I woke up early before 7 and lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts revolved around my upcoming meeting with Sarah and what lay ahead for me. Doubts began to gnaw at my soul again. Was I doing the right thing? Was it too extreme a step to sue my own daughter? The phone on the bedside table rang. I glanced at the screen. Emily? My finger hovered over the answer button, but I decided not to pick up. Whatever she said now wouldn't change my mind. It would only drain the energy I had left. At 9:30, I was outside Sarah's office. The receptionist nodded understandingly when she saw me and let me into the office without announcement. Sarah was sitting at her desk, looking over some papers. "Good morning. Mr. Thompson?" She gestured to a chair. "I see you're early. Good. We'll have more time." I sat down, clutching my wallet nervously. "Ms. Klein, I've been wondering, do we really have to file a police report? Wouldn't a civil lawsuit be enough?" Sarah looked at me intently, having second thoughts. "Yes," I admitted honestly. "I was up all night thinking about it. I think a criminal case is too final. No turning back after that." "Do you want a way back?" Sarah asked gently. "After what your daughter did." I sighed. "I don't know. What she did is horrible. But she's still my child." "Look." Sarah set the papers aside and leaned across the desk toward me. "Let's do this. We'll gather all the evidence first and then decide which direction to go. We can start with a civil lawsuit and leave the question of criminal prosecution pending. How about that?" "Yes, that sounds better." I agreed with relief. "Then let's get started." Sarah pulled out a blank notebook. "We need to compile a timeline of events and collect documents confirming the fraud. Let's start from the beginning. When did you first learn about the loan?" We spent the next 2 hours reconstructing what had happened. I told her everything. The letter from the bank, the conversation with the operator, Emily's strange reaction and Michael's, my daughter's new car, and the house on Lakeside Drive. "So," Sarah summarized, "the loan was processed on April 20th. Were you anywhere that day, maybe traveling or at a doctor's appointment? We need to prove that you couldn't have physically signed the documents at the bank." I thought, trying to recall that day. April 20th. "Yes, I remember. I had a routine health checkup at Mercy General Hospital that day. It took almost the whole day from 8 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. First tests, then consultation with the cardiologist, then some other procedures. It was a Wednesday. I remember exactly, because I was worried about the results." "Excellent." Sarah made a note. "We'll request medical records from the clinic to confirm your presence there when the loan deal was supposedly signed." "That's important evidence. Will they provide us that information?" "At the request of the counsel preparing for trial." "Yes. Anything else?" "Oh. Yes. We need samples of your real signature to compare it with the one on the loan agreement." "Do you have any signed documents with you?" I pulled my driver's license and passport from my wallet. "Just these. The rest are at home. That's enough for starters." Sarah nodded. "I'll make copies later. We'll need a formal handwriting examination, but that's for the trial." She left the office with my documents, and I remained seated, looking at the many plants on the windowsill. Among them was a succulent, small, unassuming, but remarkably resilient. In some ways, it reminded me of myself. Sarah returned with my documents and a glass of water for me. "Here, drink this. We have a lot of work to do." I gratefully accepted the water. What's next? Next, we need to get a copy of the loan agreement from the bank. I've already prepared the request. Sarah showed me a document on official letterhead. You'll need to sign it. We'll also need information on all loan payments, who made them and when. That will help prove you had nothing to do with the loan. I signed the request, feeling strangely relieved that I wasn't the only one dealing with this complicated story. Now, about the house on Lakeside Drive, Sarah continued. You said you found information about it online, but we need official real estate records. Who's it registered to? Who was the buyer in the purchase agreement? I'll file a request, but it will take time. How long, I asked. 5 to 7 days? Bureaucracy? Sarah shrugged. But there are ways to speed things up. I know a real estate broker who has access to property databases. He can provide preliminary, unofficial information. I'll contact him today. What about the bank? I asked, how could they issue such a large loan without checking everything thoroughly? That's a good question. Sarah nodded. Banks are obligated to conduct strict identity verification of borrowers. But if the fraudster had all your documents, including social security number and tax returns, plus a carefully forged signature, plus if the application was submitted by someone you know well, who could answer personal questions about you. Banks make mistakes too, or turn a blind eye if it's a good deal, I added. And that's possible. Sarah agreed. In any case, we'll definitely find out if there were any irregularities in the loan processing. The next few days passed in anxious anticipation. Sarah was busy gathering evidence, and I tried to live a normal life, though it wasn't easy. The kids didn't call, neither Emily nor Michael. Apparently, they decided to give me time to come to my senses. On the 4th day, Sarah called and asked me to come to her office. I have some news, she said as I entered her office. A real estate broker I know provided information about the house on Lakeside Drive. Guess who it's registered to? Emily, I guessed. Not quite. Sarah handed me a printout. It's registered to Harrison Ventures, LLC. This is a limited liability company formed by your son-in-law, David Harrison, 2 months ago, right before the house purchase. I frowned. Why go to all that trouble? Why not register the house directly to themselves? To hide the true owner, Sarah explained. It's a common practice when people want to conceal something. In this case, I think your daughter and her husband wanted to hide the connection between the loan in your name and the house purchase. If the house had been transferred directly to Emily, it would be too obvious where the money went. But they live in that house, right? How do they explain that? Officially, they rent the house from Harrison Ventures. At least that's what my source says. The rent is $1,500 a month, much lower than the market price for such a house. I shook my head, amazed at my daughter's cunning. I didn't realize she was capable of such maneuvers. Not only that, Sarah continued, I have a copy of the loan contract from the bank. Look at the signature. She held it out to me. There was a scribble in the borrower's signature column that from afar resembled my signature. It doesn't even look like it, I exclaimed. How could the bank accept such an obvious forgery? Because someone at the bank helped your daughter? Sarah tapped her finger on the document. Note the name of the loan officer who handled the transaction. Jason Reed. Does that name sound familiar? I hesitated. No, I don't remember. What about your daughter? I don't know. Wait a minute. I recalled a conversation at Sophia's birthday party. Michael mentioned someone named Jason that Emily went to college with. I think they dated for a while, but I'm not sure if it's the same Jason. Worth checking. Sarah made a note. If the loan officer knows your daughter personally, that would explain how she bypassed the standard checks. Sarah pulled out another document. This is the loan payment report. 2 payments have been made. Guess by whom? Emily, no. Harrison Ventures. The money is flowing from a company account. Another attempt to hide involvement. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I'd heard. My daughter didn't just use my documents. She built an entire scheme to cover her actions. What about Michael? I asked. Have you found out his role in all this? No direct evidence of his involvement, Sarah replied. But judging by his reaction, as you described, he was certainly aware of his sister's scheme. The question is whether he actively helped or just turned a blind eye. At that moment, Sarah's cell phone rang. She apologized and answered it. The conversation was brief, but afterward the lawyer's face lit up. Great news. Mercy General Hospital has confirmed that on April 20th, you were indeed there from 8:30 in the morning until 3:45 in the afternoon. They keep all records, including the time of each procedure and consultation, and the loan agreement, according to the bank's stamp, was signed at 11:20 that same day. So, I couldn't physically be at the bank at that time. I said, exactly. Sarah nodded. That's solid alibi evidence. Now, we have all that evidence we need for the lawsuit, the forged signature, your alibi for the signing time, the suspicious role of the loan officer, and the clear scheme to conceal the true purpose of the loan. I remained silent, digesting the information. On one hand, I was relieved that irrefutable evidence had been collected. On the other, I was disheartened thinking about how carefully Emily had planned the whole thing. This wasn't an impulsive act or a moment of weakness. This was a well-thought-out fraud against her own father. Are you okay? Sarah asked, noticing my state. Not really, I replied honestly. I just can't believe my daughter, that she could do this to me. Unfortunately, it's not rare, Sarah said, especially when it comes to aging parents. Many children start seeing them not as full people, but as assets or a nuisance or a potential inheritance source. It's sad, but it's reality. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. You know, when George, my husband, passed, I thought nothing worse would ever happen in my life. But this hurts even more. Sarah silently handed me a box of tissues. I dabbed my eyes, trying to compose myself. I'm sorry. I'm not usually this emotional. Don't apologize, Sarah said gently. You have every right to feel whatever you want in a situation like this. We sat in silence for a while. Then Sarah asked, What do you want to do next? We have enough evidence for a civil lawsuit. If we win, the bank will cancel the loan agreement, and you won't have to pay the loan. But the house might be seized since it was bought with illegally obtained money. And the criminal case? I asked quietly. For that, you'll have to file a report with the police, Sarah replied. They'll conduct their investigation, and if they find sufficient evidence, the case will go to the prosecutor's office. If your daughter is convicted, she could face fines and possibly probation. Actual jail time is rare in such cases, especially if it's a first offense. I wondered, do I want my daughter to have a criminal record? No. But do I want her to realize the seriousness of what she did? Definitely. Can we start with the civil lawsuit? I asked. Can we leave the criminal case open? I want to see how Emily reacts. Maybe she'll come to her senses, admit her guilt. Of course, Sarah agreed. We can take it one step at a time. First, we'll file the civil lawsuit, and then depending on how things develop, we'll decide whether to involve the police. Thank you. I felt relieved. When can we file the suit? I'll have the papers ready by the end of the week. Sarah said we'll file in the Springfield County Court. Then your daughter will receive official notice of the trial. It usually takes about a month to prepare for the first hearing. A whole month, I was surprised. So long, that's the court rules. Sarah shrugged. But the good news is, I'll file for temporary measures. If the judge approves it, the bank will suspend all claims on the loan until the trial ends, so you won't have to worry about making payments in the meantime. As I left Sarah's office, the sun was shining outside, a complete contrast to my inner state. I felt devastated, as if I'd been through a serious illness. On the way home, I stopped at a small cafe where I occasionally met Margaret. I wanted to be among normal people, listening to ordinary conversations to forget my heavy thoughts. I ordered tea and sat watching the patrons. At the next table, a young woman was having lunch with her elderly mother. They were chatting animatedly about something, laughing. The daughter carefully adjusted her mother's scarf, listening to her with genuine interest. It was an ordinary picture that before would not have evoked any special emotions in me, but now I looked at them with a pang of longing. Why had things gone so wrong with Emily and me? When had we lost the closeness that should exist between father and daughter? Perhaps I was a bad father, not giving enough attention to my children, demanding too much, or conversely, too little. No, I always tried to be a good father. George and I worked hard to give the kids everything they needed. I read books to them, helped with homework, supported their interests. Sure, I made mistakes. Every parent does. But I never betrayed my children, never lied to them, never exploited them. Emily had betrayed me, exploited me, lied to me, and she didn't even think it was a big deal, judging by her reaction. Perhaps it's not my fault. Perhaps it's her character, her choices, her sense of morality, and as painful as it was to admit, I couldn't be responsible for her decisions. When I got home, I found 3 messages from Emily on the answering machine. The first demanded I call her back immediately. In the second, she threatened serious consequences if I didn't stop this lawyer nonsense. In the third, her tone turned pleading. "Dad, please, I'll explain everything. Don't do this. Please." I didn't return the call. What else could she say? What excuse could she offer? I took out a loan in your name because I wanted a better house. I forged your signature because I knew you'd say no. I hid everything from you because I didn't think you needed to be in the loop. No explanation could change what had happened. My daughter had betrayed my trust, broken the law, and threatened my financial security. And worst of all, she didn't even see the harm in it. I went to bed early, but couldn't sleep for a long time, replaying the events of the last few days in my head. All the evidence pointed to Emily acting deliberately and calculatedly. She didn't just use my name. She created a plan to cover her actions. She registered the house to a shell company. She used her bank connections to bypass checks. It wasn't an impulsive mistake. It was a carefully plotted fraud, and Michael knew about it. Maybe he wasn't directly involved, but he certainly knew and approved of his sister's actions. His reaction to my call left no doubt. My children conspired against me. They didn't see me as a person with feelings and rights, but as what? An obstacle, an inconvenience, a means to their ends. How could I not have seen this before? How could I not notice that my children's attitude toward me had long crossed the line from mere disrespect? All my life, I tried to be a good father, supporting them, helping them, making concessions. And as a result, they decided they could use me as they pleased. Yes, it was time to show them they were wrong. I'm not a helpless old man to be manipulated. I'm a father who loves his children but won't let them trample my self-respect. Yes, it hurts. Yes, I feel betrayed, but that pain doesn't break me. On the contrary, it gives me strength. Strength to fight for justice. Strength to show my children that actions have consequences. Strength to finally respect myself. I called Sarah in this morning and told her I was ready to sue as soon as possible. It was time for decisive action. 2 weeks had passed since the lawsuit was filed. Sarah warned me that Emily would receive official notice of the suit in a few days. Then we could expect a new wave of calls and visits to influence me. So I tried to prepare myself mentally for the coming storm. However, contrary to expectations, the phone was silent. Neither Emily nor Michael tried to contact me. I even started to worry. Maybe something had happened to the kids. But then I decided they were just ignoring me, hoping I'd come to my senses and withdraw the lawsuit. On Thursday morning, I got a call from Margaret. She spoke quickly and excitedly. "Walter, do you have a seat? Better sit down." "What's up?" I asked, sinking into the chair by the phone. "My granddaughter Paige. You remember her? She works part-time at Golden Fork Catering, so she just called me and told me that the company received an order to cater Emily's party. A housewarming party this Saturday at Lakeside Drive. I was silent, digesting the information. Emily was throwing a housewarming party in a house bought with fraudulently obtained loan money in my name. And of course, she didn't invite me. "Walter, are you there?" Margaret's voice brought me back to reality. "Yes, I'm here," I replied. "I'm just thinking about what I heard." "It's outrageous," Margaret exclaimed. "Throwing a housewarming party when there's a pending lawsuit and not even inviting your own father. I've always said your Emily is a real piece of work. But this is beyond the pale." "How many guests is she expecting?" I asked, surprised at my own calmness. "Paige says for 50 people. Cocktails, appetizers, champagne, the works." I imagined Emily leading guests through her new luxurious home, accepting congratulations, talking about designer renovations and the lake view, and not a word about how she managed to afford the property. "Thanks for letting me know. Margaret," I said, "that's important information." "What are you going to do?" Her voice was curious. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'm sure I'll think of something." After talking to Margaret, I called Sarah's number. Fortunately, she was in and answered immediately. "Mr. Thompson, I was just about to call you," she said. "The bailiff couldn't serve your daughter the notice. She won't answer the door or the phone." "I think I know when and where we can definitely find her," I said and told her about the upcoming party. "Are you suggesting we serve her the subpoena right at the housewarming party?" Sarah asked. "It's unconventional. Are there any legal obstacles?" I asked. "No, legally. There are no prohibitions," Sarah replied. "The bailiff can serve documents wherever the defendant is, but it could cause a scandal." "Let it," I said firmly. "My daughter is throwing a party in a house she bought with illegally obtained money, and she didn't even bother to invite me, even though the loan is in my name. I think a little scandal is the least she deserves." "All right, I'll arrange with the bailiff to meet you Saturday evening near your daughter's house. 5:30, okay. Fine, I agreed. Let me know the exact location closer to the day. After talking to Sarah, I felt unusually calm. The decision was made, and now all I had to do was follow the plan. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of the situation rather than adrift. The rest of the week passed in anxious anticipation. I tried to keep busy with daily tasks, cleaning, reading, working in the garden, but my thoughts kept returning to Saturday. Was I doing the right thing? Was it too cruel to spoil my daughter's celebration? But every time doubt started to gnaw at me, I recalled what Emily had done, and my resolve returned. On Saturday, I woke up early. The day was clear and warm, perfect weather for a lakeside party. I stood in front of the closet for a long time, wondering what to wear. Finally, I chose a dark blue suit with a white collar, formal but elegant. I styled my hair and applied light aftershave. Looking in the mirror, I didn't see a grief-stricken old man, but one with dignity and courage. At 5, I called a taxi. Usually, I use public transport, but today was a special occasion. Besides, I didn't know how I'd get home, and I didn't want to depend on bus schedules. Sarah had sent me the address of a cafe near Lakeside Drive where we were to meet the bailiff. When the taxi pulled up to the cafe, I saw Sarah sitting at a table on the outdoor patio. Next to her was a tall, middle-aged man in a formal suit. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah stood up when she saw me. "I want you to meet Mr. Robert Kane, the bailiff." Mr. Kane nodded politely. "Good evening, sir. Miss Klein has explained the situation to me. I'll serve the notice to Mrs. Harrison in accordance with all rules." "Thank you." I shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Here's the action plan," Sarah said. "Mr. Kane will pose as a caterer to get into the house. Once he identifies your daughter, he'll hand her the papers. You can go in with him or wait outside and come later, Whichever is more convenient for you. I pondered. Appearing with the bailiff, or waiting until the documents are served and then entering. Which would make a stronger impression? I think it's better if I go in with Mr. Kane. I decided. Emily should know right away that this isn't an accident or coincidence. As you say. Sarah nodded. Just remember, the goal isn't to cause a scandal, but to show you're serious and won't back down. Try to maintain your dignity no matter what happens. I'll try, I promised, though I was trembling inside. We decided to walk. It was only a 10-minute stroll from the cafe to Emily's house. On the way, Sarah explained the legal aspects of the situation to me again. After the notice is served, your daughter will be officially considered notified of the lawsuit. She'll have 21 days to file a response with the court. If she doesn't, the court may issue a default judgment in your favor. I nodded, but my thoughts were far away. I imagined entering a house where I had never been welcomed before. I'd see my daughter's face when she realized her scheme was exposed. What would she say? How would she react? And how would I feel about it? Lakeside Drive was exactly as I imagined. A row of luxurious lakeside homes with manicured lawns and expensive cars in the driveways. Number 45 stood out even in this setting. A 2-story building with panoramic windows and a terrace overlooking the lake. Several cars were already parked outside the house, and muted music and laughter came from the open windows. The party's in full swing, Mr. Kane remarked, adjusting his tie. Perfect timing. We walked to the front door. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I tried to stay calm. Mr. Kane rang the bell. A few seconds later, the door was opened by a young woman in a server's uniform. "Are you from Golden Fork?" she asked. "We're expecting extra staff." "Yes." Mr. Kane nodded confidently. "I was sent to help with serving. And this gentleman is the quality inspector. We need to speak with the hostess." "Sure, come in." The girl let us inside. Mrs. Harrison is in the living room with her guests. We entered a spacious hallway with marble floors and mirrored walls. There were flowers everywhere, and a crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling that must have cost a fortune. I held my breath. This is what the money from the loan in my name was used for. Mr. Kane strode confidently toward where the voices were coming from. I followed him, trying not to betray my excitement. We entered a large living room with panoramic windows overlooking the lake. The room was filled with people in evening attire, glasses of champagne in their hands. In the center of the group stood Emily, in an elegant beige dress, animatedly talking about something. When she saw a strange man in a suit, she stopped mid-sentence. When she saw me, her face froze in shock. "Dad!" she said incredulously. "How did you get here?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me and Mr. Kane, who stepped forward. "Mrs. Emily Harrison?" he asked in a formal tone. "Yes," my daughter replied confusedly. "And who are you?" "I'm Robert Kane, bailiff." He pulled some papers from his inner jacket pocket. "I'm here to serve you with notice of the lawsuit from Walter Thompson for fraud and forgery." Emily's face paled. She stood motionless, staring at the papers handed to her. "What the hell is this?" cried out David, Emily's husband, stepping forward. "What kind of lawsuit?" "The lawsuit concerns a $1,200,000 mortgage loan illegally taken out in Mr. Thompson's name," Mr. Kane explained calmly. "Mrs. Harrison, please accept the papers." Emily mechanically took the documents, still staring at me in shock. "Dad, are you insane?" she hissed, "making such a scene in front of everyone?" "No, Emily, you're the one who's insane," I said quietly, but firmly. "Taking out a loan in my name without my knowledge? Forging my signature? Buying a house with money that doesn't belong to you?" The room became so quiet, you could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Guests looked around in confusion. Someone started heading toward the exit. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Kane bowed slightly toward me. My task is complete. I'm fine unless you have further instructions. Thank you, Mr. Kane. I nodded. You may go. The bailiff bowed politely and headed to the exit. There was an awkward silence in the living room. Emily stood clutching the documents she had received and seemed unsure what to do next. Let's continue the party. Everyone? David tried to lighten the mood. Miss, he said to the server girl, bring more champagne while my father-in-law and I talk in the study. He took a step towards me, intending to grab my arm, but I stepped back. No, David, I said, no talk in the study. Everything I have to say, I've said in court. Now I want to see the house I bought with the loan in my name. I have that right, don't I? Dad, stop this right now. Emily had finally regained her voice. You're embarrassing us in front of everyone. No, Emily, you're embarrassing yourself with your actions, I said calmly. I'm just telling the truth. What truth, Michael, whom I hadn't noticed among the guests, interjected, What are you making up again? Dad. I'm not making anything up. Michael, I turned to my son. Your sister took out the loan in my name by forging my signature, and you knew about it but did nothing to stop her. That's not true, Michael muttered, but I could see in his eyes that I had hit the mark. Enough. Emily threw the papers on the coffee table. Dad, get out of here right now or I'll call the police. Call them, I said calmly. It'll be interesting to explain to the officers why you're throwing out of the house the person in whose name the loan for its purchase is. There was a surprised murmur among the guests. Some even whistled softly. Emily looked as if she had been punched. Ladies and gentlemen, I turned to the guests. I'm sorry for the scene. I didn't mean to ruin your evening, but I think you should know that this beautiful house was bought with fraudulently obtained money. My daughter used my documents and forged my signature to get a $1,200,000 loan. And then she registered the house to a shell company to cover her actions. That's a lie! Emily screamed. Dad, you agreed to help us with the loan. You authorized me. Did I? I raised an eyebrow. Where's that authorization? Why didn't you show it to the bank? Why did you have to forge my signature? And why did I only find out about the loan when I got the late payment letter? Emily fell silent, pursing her lips into a thin line. David put his hand on her shoulder, as if trying to support her. Let's continue the party, he said in an advisory tone. No, David. I shook my head. We've tried talking already. Emily ignored my calls. Michael urged me not to do anything stupid. None of you took the situation seriously. You thought I'd just accept it as I always do, but not this time. I paused. Walking around the living room, luxurious interior, designer furniture, expensive lighting, paintings in fancy frames. Everything screamed money. Money obtained by fraud. It's a beautiful house, I said. Too bad it'll have to be sold soon to pay off the debt, or the bank will seize it. I haven't decided which option I prefer yet. You can't do that, Emily cried, taking a step toward me. This is our home. We've worked our whole lives to afford a house like this. No, Emily, I objected. You didn't work for this. You just stole the money using my name, and now you'll have to answer for it. That's when Sophia, my granddaughter, ran into the living room. She stopped, seeing the scene. What's going on? She asked, looking from her mother to me. Grandpa, why are you here? Hello? Sophia. I smiled at her. I came to see the house. It's beautiful. Sophia, go to your room, Emily said sharply. Now. But, Mom. Now, Emily repeated, raising her voice. Sophia looked at me confused and reluctantly left the room. See what you've done? Emily turned to me. You've traumatized the child with your stupid accusations. No. Emily, I said calmly. You've traumatized your daughter by setting an example of dishonesty and disrespect for the law. What will she think when she learns the truth about how you got this house? She'll never know. Emily gritted her teeth. Because there's no truth. It's just the fiction of a senile old man jealous of his own children's success. I felt anger surging in me, but I restrained it. This wasn't the time or place for emotional outbursts. Fiction? I shook my head. I have evidence. Emily, handwriting analysis proving the signature is forged. Medical records proving I was at Mercy General when the loan agreement was signed. Property records showing the house is registered to a shell company called Harrison Ventures. Information on loan payments made from the company's business account. And the testimony of Jason Reed, the loan officer who admitted helping you bypass checks because of your past relationship. With each word I said, Emily's face grew paler. I saw fear flash in her eyes for the first time in our entire confrontation. You're lying, she whispered. Jason would never. He already testified. I lied, hoping Sarah would forgive me this little trick. When given the choice between helping you and facing prosecution, he chose to save himself. Typical of men, isn't it? David was now looking at his wife with bewilderment and suspicion. Emily, what is she talking about? Who is Jason? Nothing, Emily snapped. She's making it up. Then why are you so pale? David asked. And why have you never told me the details of how the loan was arranged? I saw a shadow of doubt pass between the couple. David may have known about his wife's scheme in general terms, but the details seemed to have been kept from him. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the guests again, many of whom were already shifting uncomfortably. Once more, I'm sorry for spoiling the evening, but perhaps you should reconsider your relationship with the owners of this house. People who can deceive their own father are unlikely to be honest with friends and colleagues. Get out of here! Emily screamed, losing her temper. Get out of my house! Technically, this isn't your house yet, I pointed out, and it won't be when the court decides my lawsuit. But I'll leave because I've done everything I wanted to do. I turned to go, but stopped when I saw Sophia standing in the doorway. She must have been eavesdropping on our conversation, and her eyes were wide with shock. Grandpa, she whispered. Is it true? Did Mom take the money without your permission? I looked at my granddaughter, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't lie either. Yes, Sophia, I said gently. Unfortunately, it's true, but it's not your fault what your parents did. Sophia, don't listen to him, Emily cried. Grandpa is confused. He doesn't know what he's saying. I understand perfectly. Emily, I said, and your daughter will understand everything soon, too. Children don't stay children forever. They grow up and start seeing their parents as they really are. With those words, I headed to the exit. No one tried to stop me. I could feel the guests' stares, surprised, sympathetic, judgmental, but I didn't care. I had done what I had to do. The story of the lawsuit and the housewarming scandal spread through Springfield at the speed of a wildfire. In a small town where everyone knows each other, events like this couldn't go unnoticed. The very next day, Margaret called, breathless with excitement. Walter, you won't believe it. The whole town is talking about it. Paige says the guests dispersed within half an hour after you left, and David and Emily had a terrible fight in front of the remaining people. I listened to her story with mixed feelings. On one hand, there was satisfaction that the truth was finally out. On the other, there was an uneasy residue from the thought that I had caused my daughter's public humiliation. She might deserve it, but it's always hard for a parent to see their child suffer. Even if that child is a grown woman who committed a crime. What about Michael? I asked. Did he stay until the end? According to Paige, he left right after you. Looked like he'd seen a ghost. The day after the housewarming scandal, the phone in my house rang incessantly. Neighbors, former colleagues, even people I hadn't spoken to in years called. Everyone wanted details, to express support, or just to gossip. I answered politely, but briefly, without going into details. This story was painful enough. I didn't need to turn it into entertainment for the curious. By evening, Sarah called. "Mr. Thompson, how are you? I hope yesterday's events didn't upset you too much." "I'm fine," I replied. Just tired from the calls. The whole town seems to be discussing our family scandal. Unfortunately, that's inevitable. Sarah sighed. But the good news is, after yesterday, your daughter has finally been officially served notice of the lawsuit. Now she'll have to respond in court or settle. Do you think she'll settle? I asked hesitantly. She probably will, especially if she hires a good lawyer. Any lawyer would advise her to avoid a trial given the amount of evidence against her. Sarah was right. 3 days later, Emily called me herself. Her voice sounded unusually subdued. "Dad, we need to talk. Can I come over?" "Sure," I said, slightly surprised by her tone. Emily arrived an hour later. She looked haggard with dark circles under her eyes. She was dressed without her usual elegance: jeans, sweater, minimal makeup. When she entered the house, she paused uncertainly in the hallway, as if she didn't know where to go next. "Come to the kitchen," I said. "I just made tea." We sat at the table opposite each other. Emily held the cup with both hands, as if warming herself against it. "Dad," she began after a pause, "I came to talk about the lawsuit." I figured. I nodded. "I'm listening." "I've hired a lawyer," Emily said. He reviewed the case file and said she stammered. "I don't have much chance of winning. The evidence is too compelling." I was silent, waiting for him to continue. He suggested settling, Emily continued, to avoid a trial and possible criminal prosecution. "And what does that settlement include?" I asked. "I take over the loan," Emily said quickly. "Put it in my name. I pay all interest and penalties. Why? Compensate you for moral damages with $15,000. In return, you drop the lawsuit and don't file a police report." I thought about it. The offer was reasonable from a practical standpoint, but something about it made me uncomfortable. "What about the house?" I asked. "What happens to the house on Lakeside Drive?" Emily pursed her lips. "David and I decided to sell it after the scandal. After everything that's happened, we can't stay there. Plus, we need the money to pay off the loan and compensate you." "I see," I nodded. "And have you realized what you did?" "What do you mean?" Emily frowned. "I want to know if you've realized the gravity of what you did," I explained. "You didn't just take money without asking. You forged documents, deceived the bank, endangered my financial security." "That's a crime." "Emily, I know," she said quietly. "My lawyer explained all the possible consequences to me. Up to 7 years in prison, fines up to $300,000. A criminal record." "I'm not talking about legal consequences," I interrupted. "I'm talking about moral ones. Have you realized that you betrayed my trust, that you did to me what a daughter should never do to her father?" Emily was silent, staring into her cup. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "I really want to understand." "David and I had long dreamed of a house by the lake," Emily began after a pause. "But we didn't have enough for the down payment. And then I found out that Jason, an old college friend of mine, works at Riverside National. Well, he said he could help with the loan, but he needed a co-borrower with good credit history. At first, I thought about asking you, but I decided it would be easier to forge the signature myself." I finished for her. "I knew you'd say no," Emily said with sudden bitterness. "You're always so proper, so cautious, always saying no to any risky proposals. And I wanted this house. I wanted to show everyone that I've achieved something in life, that I'm not just a low-paid social services inspector, but a successful woman who can afford Lakeside Drive. And for that, you were willing to risk my house." My reputation, my future. I didn't think you'd find out, Emily said quietly. We planned to pay on time. No late payments. But then David had some business problems and we missed a payment. And the bank sent the notice. I nodded. That's how I found out. We didn't speak for a while. It had started raining outside the window. Drops falling into the evening stillness. A monotonous soothing. All right, I said at last. I'll consider your settlement offer. But I'll need to consult with a lawyer. Of course, Emily nodded quickly. I understand. But Dad, please don't take this to trial. It'll ruin my career. I'll lose my job. And Sophia, she'll be so ashamed in front of her friends. I looked at my daughter and saw no remorse. I saw fear. Fear of consequences, not shame for what she had done. She still didn't realize that the main problem wasn't the threat to her career or reputation, but that she had betrayed her own father. I'll give you an answer in a few days, Emily said. I need to think it over more. Left, leaving a feeling of incompleteness. I didn't see genuine remorse in her, only a desire to avoid trouble, and it made me question the idea of a settlement. The next day, Michael came over. Unlike his sister, he was aggressive from the start. Dad, this has gone too far. Do you realize you're destroying our family with your actions? I'm not destroying the family. Michael, I said calmly, you and Emily did when you decided you could use me for your own purposes. Oh, come on, he rolled his eyes. Such drama. No one exploited you. Emily just wanted a better life for her family. She decided to get it at my expense. I said, it's called fraud, Michael, and you knew it. But you did nothing to stop your sister. Michael paced the room anxiously. Look, I didn't know all the details. Okay, Emily told me you had an agreement that you agreed to help with the loan, and you believed it. I smirked. After knowing me all your life, do you really believe I agreed to a loan for nearly $1.5 million? I don't know. Michael shrugged. Maybe you finally decided to do something useful for your children. His words were like a slap in the face. Finally decided to do something useful. As if all the years of care, love, support meant nothing. As if I owed them something more than what I'd already given. Get out, I said quietly. Now, Dad, don't be so dramatic. Michael tried to take my hand. I just want you to withdraw the lawsuit. Emily has been punished enough. Everyone's talking. David is on the verge of divorce. The house will have to be sold. Get out, I repeated. I won't discuss this with you, especially after what you just said. Michael wanted to object, but something in my face stopped him. He sighed and headed to the door. You'll regret this, Dad, when you're left alone. After he left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, looking out the window and thinking, maybe Michael was right. Maybe I'm being too harsh on Emily. After all, she's my daughter, no matter her mistakes. But then I remembered her face when she talked about the possible consequences to her career. Not a word about how her actions affected me. No understanding that she did something irreparably wrong to her father. I called Sarah and told her about Emily's offer. Legally, it's a reasonable offer. The lawyer said, you'll be compensated and freed from your loan obligations. But of course, the decision is yours. What happens if we proceed with the lawsuit? I asked. With the evidence, the court will almost certainly rule in your favor, Sarah replied. The bank will be obligated to cancel the loan contract as fraudulent. And then there are two options. Either the bank goes to the police to report the fraud, or it tries to recover the money from your daughter in civil proceedings. And the house will likely be seized to repay the debt, since it's collateral for the loan. I pondered. Strangely, the prospect of losing the house bothered me the least. After all, it wasn't my house. I hadn't even been inside it until that evening. More important was the question, what will Emily learn if I just agree to a settlement? I'll let you know what I decide, I said to Sarah. That night, I got another call from Margaret. "Walter, have you heard the latest news David left Emily?" They say he was furious when he found out about the loan. Turns out she didn't tell him everything either. I sighed. Not that I had any particular sympathy for David, but the breakup of a family couldn't make me happy, especially since he and Emily have a daughter. "What about Sophia?" I asked, still living with her mother. "But there are rumors that David will seek joint custody. The problems have snowballed." Was it my fault this happened? Hadn't Emily's actions set off this chain of events? I stayed up all night thinking about the situation. By morning, I decided I wouldn't settle. Let the court hear the case and deliver a fair verdict. Only then would Emily truly realize the seriousness of what she had done. The trial began a month later. Emily hired an expensive lawyer from the capital who built a defense on the fact that I supposedly gave verbal consent for the loan. But when Sarah presented the evidence, handwriting examination, documents proving my alibi, testimony from the bank employee, it was clear the defense had no chance. The judge, an older woman with keen eyes, listened carefully to both sides. At the end of the second session, she said, "The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Harrison acted without her father's consent and forged his signature on the loan documents. Such actions fall under the definition of fraud and forgery. However, considering the familial relationship between the plaintiff and defendant, I suggest the parties reconsider the possibility of settlement. This trial is adjourned for a week." During the break, Emily approached me in the court hallway. She looked exhausted and depressed. "Dad, please, let's end this." "You see what's coming next? I could lose everything. My job, my reputation, even my freedom. Think of Sophia. How will it be for her to live with the stigma of being the daughter of a criminal?" I looked at her and saw not a repentant daughter, but a woman trying to evade responsibility for her actions to the last possible moment. Even now, she was only thinking about herself, using Sophia as a means to pressure me. "You should have thought about Sophia before you committed the crime," I said quietly, "and the example you set for your daughter with your actions." "Is that what this is about?" Emily smirked bitterly. "Trying to teach me a lesson? Prove that Dad is always right? To get revenge for all the years I didn't obey you?" "No, Emily," I shook my head. "I just want justice. And I want you to finally realize that your actions have consequences, not only for you, but for others." Emily looked at me with a mix of disbelief and anger. "You know what? Do whatever you want. But after this, I won't consider you my father anymore, and you can forget about having a granddaughter." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the empty hallway with a heavy heart. Her words hurt deeply, but didn't shake my resolve. If that was the price of justice, I was ready to pay it. A week later, the court ruled in my favor. The loan contract was declared null and void, and the bank was ordered to cancel all my obligations under it. Emily was ordered to pay me $25,000 in compensation for moral damages. The judge also noted that the bank had the right to report the fraud to law enforcement agencies, but that decision was left to the financial institution's discretion. After the verdict was announced, Emily passed by me without a word or a glance in my direction. Michael, who was sitting in the courtroom, also defiantly turned away. I was left alone except for Sarah and Margaret, who had supported me throughout the trial. "You've won, Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, shaking my hand. "Justice has been served." "Yes," I nodded. "But at what cost? Sometimes truth comes at a price," Sarah said philosophically. "The question is whether it's worth the cost." I didn't answer. I didn't know the answer to that question at that moment. The consequences of the lawsuit didn't take long to arrive. The bank didn't go to the police, preferring to resolve the issue amicably. They seized the house on Lakeside Drive to repay the loan. Emily and Sophia had to move to a small apartment in another part of town. David filed for divorce, seeking joint custody of his daughter. Michael stopped answering my calls. His wife, Patricia, with whom I always had a great relationship, called one day to tell me they didn't want me in contact with their children. "They're too impressionable for family dramas," she said. I found myself isolated from my children and grandchildren, who had never been eager to communicate with me before, now completely cut off ties. Strangely, I didn't feel as bitter as I expected. Did it hurt? Of course, I had lost my children and grandchildren, perhaps forever. But at the same time, I gained something no less important: self-respect and freedom from toxic relationships that had corroded my soul for years. Margaret became my strongest support during this time. She stopped by almost every day, bringing fresh baked goods, sharing city news, just being there for me. She was the one who suggested I start a new chapter in my life. "Walter, how many years have you lived for others?" she asked me one day over a cup of tea. "First for your wife, then for your children. And when was the last time you did something for yourself? Something you dreamed of, but postponed for later?" I pondered. Really? When perhaps before the children were born, or even before marriage. "You see," Margaret exclaimed, noticing my confusion, "it's time to fix that. You're free. You have a small savings plus the compensation from the court. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What do you want to learn?" "I don't know. I was confused. It's been so long since I thought about my own desires." "Then let's start small," Margaret said decisively. "I've signed us up for computer classes at the community center twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Starting next Tuesday." "Learn computers?" I was surprised. "Why?" "Because the world doesn't stand still, and neither should we." Margaret smiled. "Besides, it'll be fun. Imagine us laughing at each other's clumsy attempts to master these modern gadgets." I agreed, though with some hesitation. I thought it was too late to learn new things at my age. But Margaret was insistent, and she was right. The classes turned out to be exactly what I needed. Not so much for the knowledge I gained, though I learned a lot, but for the atmosphere. There were people my age with similar problems and interests, people who didn't see me as a burden or a potential inheritance source. People I could communicate with as an equal. About a month after starting the classes, I received a call from Sarah. "Mr. Thompson, I have news for you. Riverside National Bank is offering you an additional $20,000 for moral damages. They've admitted that their employee, Jason Reed, violated their screening procedures when issuing the loan, and they want to avoid further proceedings." "Yes, that's fair," I said. "If the bank had been more vigilant, none of this would have happened." "Exactly," Sarah agreed. "I'll prepare all the necessary documents." "How are you, by the way?" "Surprisingly well," I said honestly. "Of course, I miss spending time with my grandchildren, but otherwise, I feel freer than I have in years." "I'm glad to hear that." Sarah sounded genuinely pleased. "You know, I've seen many cases like this, and often people, even if they win the lawsuit, feel like they've lost because of the broken relationships. But you seem to have found something positive in this situation." "Yes. I guess so." I agreed. I realized that I can live for myself, not just for my children. And my value as a person doesn't depend on their attitude toward me. Having received the additional compensation from the bank for the first time in my life, I was the owner of a fairly large sum of money that I could dispose of at my own discretion. Before, all my savings were either spent on family needs or set aside for a rainy day. Now I could afford something I'd dreamed of for a long time but never dared. "You should go on a trip," Margaret urged me. "Remember how you've always wanted to visit Italy?" "That was long ago." I smiled. "Even before the kids were born. George promised we'd go there for our silver anniversary, but then my health issues started, and there was no time for travel." "So make up for lost time," Margaret winked. "Imagine Venice, gondolas, narrow streets, cafes on Piazza San Marco. Do you want to come with me?" I asked suddenly. Margaret froze with the cup at her lips. Me. But I thought you wanted to go alone. Why would I want to go alone? I shook my head. It'll be more fun together. Besides, you're always braver than me. If I get confused, you'll know exactly what to do. Margaret smiled. You know, I've never been to Europe. I always wanted to. But there were always children, grandchildren, commitments. Yes. Walter? I'll go. Good, I said. Let's start planning.